The first processor I recommend using is an EQ for some small corrective EQ changes. I'd also recommend that you use a dedicated mastering EQ or linear phase EQ. These are more transparent and don't introduce any weird phasing shifts between the EQ bands with the audio. They do use a bit more processing CPU, but you will get much better results. So on this track, I want to add a linear phase EQ. Now let me give you some quick little tips on some good advice just to use when you're starting out using EQ with mastering. You're going to have some low rumble happening here that you're not really going to hear. So some good practice is to use a low cut to remove some of this. And this is going to be everything under about 40 Hertz. So I'm just going to remove that low rumble. And what also works is to do a slight cut at the 2500 Hertz region. So I'm just going to do a slight dip. And with mastering, you want to do some subtle changes with some very wide Q values. And then just to give a slight little boost or lift at 12 kilohertz. This just is going to give it a bit of air to the sound. So that's just a very good starting template for your mastering. So I've got this before. Let's take a listen. And then with the linear phase EQ. Before. And then after with the EQ. So just removing that rumble and giving a slight lift. Now, with mastering, you're probably going to take a good couple selection of tracks and master them together. And what you want to do is get the tracks sitting well together. And to do this, you can do some EQ changes or EQ correction between the tracks to get them to sit together. So if you listen to this track, and then the second track I have over here, they're two different styles of tracks and they've got some slight tonal differences. So let's see what we can do with some corrective linear phase EQ correcting. I'm going to copy this linear phase EQ across to this track. And what I want to do is just pull up my multimeter and just compare the frequency differences between the tracks. So here's the first track. And then this track. Maybe somewhere over here. So you can see there's a lot more high content detail in this track. So there's two ways I can correct this. I can either take this first track and boost the high registers in it, or take this track and drop the high registers to get them to sit together well. I think I'm going to do a bit of a mix of both. On this track, I want to boost the high registers, maybe just pull this in a bit more. And then on this track, on the EQ, I want to drop the high registers a bit, just by 3 dB. Now if I listen to the two together, and then just this track over here. I think those are sounding pretty close. So that's a way to use some mastering EQ to get more than one track to sit better together. You've gone through different mixing processes with your different tracks, but in mastering, you want to tie them together so that they form a sort of cohesive sound. So that's covering stereo mastering EQ. Now, there is another form of EQ that's quite popular in mastering, and that's called mid-side EQ. Now, it's quite a clever process where the processing is broken down into two parts. One is there's a processing on the mid or mono signal, which is basically everything in the middle. And then you have the sides, which is the stereo or left and right sides. They are two different things. So let me show you how this works. On this track, I'm just going to bypass this EQ, and then I'm going to add 2 new instances of it. And another one. And you'll see that on these, I can choose the processing type. So here it's set to stereo, but I can also choose to process only the mid, or the left only, or the right only, or the sides. So on this one, I'm going to choose the mid, and on this one, I'm going to choose the sides. Now let me give you an idea on how mid-side processing works. I'm going to pull up the multimeter and switch over to this analyzer meter view over here to demonstrate this for you. I'm just going to jump my playhead to the first track, and I want to bypass the one that's processing the side, and I just want to show you the one that's processing the mid or mono. So if I play back on the meter here, I can see the mono signal, and if I do a boost up over here, you can hear how it's boosting the mono signal of the audio. And look at this view here. Now let me show you if I do this on the sides. So let me do a boost over here. Can you see how it has changed the stereo? It hasn't boosted the mono, but it's boosted out to the sides. Now you're probably wondering, how is this beneficial? Now how this works is that you can apply specific EQing to each of these different bands. Now let's see this in practice and why you'd use it. So on this track, on the mono, what I want to do is I want to cut out that low rumble. And maybe I want to do a slight boost in the mono where the bass and kick sits at 200 Hertz. Then on the sides, I can actually pull quite a bit out because the mono or the mid side is going to be compensating for that region over there. So let's say I pull out about 200 Hertz, and then I want to do the lift or air over here. And this will be doing it on the sides where the instruments with higher registers, like the sort of cymbals and sparkle of the drums, are going to be enhanced on this side. Now let's take a listen. So I've got a tighter mono or mid section, and I've got that air going on the sides. Now let's compare this to the stereo EQing. So there's the stereo. And then with the mid-side EQing. So it's very subtle, but it's just got its slight benefit over the stereo EQing if that's the way you want to go. So go in and either use a stereo mastering EQ if you're happy with that to fine-tune your EQing across your songs, or use a mid-side EQ if you want that extra control over your corrective EQing in your mastering, as it can really help get a much tighter midsection, plus also add some extra air to those sides. If you don't have an EQ with MS capabilities, you can use Vox & Go's MS-ED tool to help you split up the mid and side bands. Plus, Brainworks has a free tool called BX Solo to also help you split up these bands. I'd also highly recommend Ozone, which has an awesome EQ in there with some MS capabilities. So check these out if you want to explore some other options for EQs you want to employ in your mastering.